Have you ever had a moment when someone you thought was powerless suddenly became the strongest person in the room? A moment when courage appeared in the most unexpected place. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because what happened the next morning changed not only one man's life, but also the lives of everyone who thought they knew who he really was. And if stories about courage, love, and ordinary heroes touch your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that true strength often hides behind the simplest faces. The night was unusually cold for early autumn. The wind pushed dry leaves across the empty parking lot of Jefferson Heights Elementary School, making faint scratching sounds against the pavement. Inside the school, the hallways were quiet except for the soft squeak of a mop and the slow hum of fluorescent lights. Daniel Carter pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, his tired shoulders slumped but his movements steady. He wore the same faded blue janitor uniform he'd worn for years. The name tag on his chest had scratches from time, but it still clearly read, Daniel. Most people at the school barely noticed him. Teachers passed him without much more than a polite nod. Parents rarely even looked at him. To them, he was just the quiet janitor who worked late shifts cleaning up after everyone else had gone home. But to one little girl, Daniel Carter was the entire world. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, sat cross-legged on a chair near the gym entrance, coloring in a book under the dim hallway light. Her small pink backpack rested beside her. "Daddy, look," she said excitedly, holding up the page. Daniel smiled warmly, the exhaustion in his face instantly melting away. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." She had drawn the two of them holding hands under a big yellow sun. "You made my head too big," Daniel joked gently. Lily giggled. "You said big heads mean big brains." Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Moments like this made every long shift worth it. Life hadn't been easy since Lily's mother passed away 3 years earlier. The illness came fast and left a silence in their small apartment that Daniel still struggled with every night. Since then, he'd worked 2 jobs whenever he could, but the janitor job at the school was the most stable. The principal allowed him to bring Lily on nights when he couldn't afford a babysitter. And Lily loved the school at night. She said it felt like a giant castle. Daniel finished mopping the last stretch of hallway and checked the time. Almost 9:30 p.m. "All right, princess," he said gently. 10 more minutes and we head home." Lily nodded, but before those 10 minutes passed, something unexpected happened. From outside, the low roar of a car engine echoed into the quiet parking lot. Daniel frowned. Most people had already left hours ago. Then another engine, and another. Headlights flashed through the windows of the gym entrance. 3 cars. Daniel stepped toward the glass doors and looked outside. 3 men climbed out of the vehicles. Something about them immediately felt wrong. They weren't parents. They weren't staff. Their movements were slow, deliberate. And they were looking around the school like hunters studying territory. Daniel's instincts tightened. He turned toward Lily. "Sweetheart," he said calmly, though his voice had hardened slightly. "Come here." She walked over, still holding her coloring book. "What is it, Daddy?" "Stay behind the desk in the office for a minute, okay?" "Why?" "Just a quick game of hide and seek." Lily smiled. She loved hide and seek. "Okay." She ran into the small administrative office near the entrance. Daniel waited until she disappeared behind the desk. Then the glass doors suddenly slammed open. The 3 men stepped inside. Heavy boots echoed on the tile floor. One of them spoke with a rough voice. "School's closed, old man." Daniel held the mop handle loosely but firmly. "You can't be in here," he said calmly. The tallest man laughed. "And you're gonna stop us?" The second man glanced around the hallway. "Check the offices." Daniel's heart thudded. They weren't here by accident. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The third man started walking toward the office where Lily was hiding. Daniel stepped forward, blocking the path. "I said," he repeated quietly, "you can't be in here." The tall man's expression darkened. He shoved Daniel hard. The janitor stumbled backward into the cleaning cart. "Move," the man growled. Then from inside the office, a small frightened voice cried out, "Daddy, please stop them." The words hit Daniel like lightning. Something changed in his eyes. For years he had lived quietly, avoiding trouble, working long hours, keeping his head down, but those men had just crossed the one line that could never be crossed. They had frightened his daughter. The first man grabbed Daniel's collar. "Listen, janitor." That was the moment everything changed. In a blur of movement, Daniel twisted the man's wrist and slammed him into the wall so hard the hallway echoed. The other two men froze in shock. The quiet janitor they'd pushed around seconds earlier moved with frightening precision. The second man rushed him. Daniel ducked, grabbed his arm, and flipped him over his shoulder onto the tile floor. The third man pulled a knife. Daniel's eyes locked onto the blade. Years of buried training snapped awake in his muscles. The man lunged. Daniel sidestepped and struck his wrist, sending the knife clattering across the floor. Then a sharp kick dropped the attacker to his knees. Within seconds, all three men were on the ground. Groaning, disarmed, helpless, Daniel stood in the center of the hallway breathing slowly, his fists clenched. Lily peeked from the office. "Daddy," he immediately softened, kneeling down and opening his arms. "It's okay," he said gently. She ran into his embrace. "They were scary, I know," he whispered. "But you were very brave." Police sirens arrived 15 minutes later. Officers rushed inside expecting chaos. Instead, they found three grown men tied up with janitor supply cords, and a calm janitor sitting beside his daughter. The officers looked confused. "Sir, did you do this?" Daniel simply nodded. The officers exchanged looks. One muttered under his breath, "That's impressive." The men were arrested. Statements were taken. Daniel and Lily were sent home around midnight. But something about the incident bothered one of the detectives. Daniel Carter. The name sounded familiar. Later that night, the detective ran a deeper background check. And what he found made his jaw drop. The quiet janitor at Jefferson Heights Elementary was not just a janitor. He was a former special operations soldier. A man who had once led high-risk missions overseas. Decorated, respected, highly trained. A hero who had disappeared from the public eye after his wife died. The detective leaned back in his chair. "Well, that explains everything." The next morning, Daniel walked Lily to school like any normal day. But as they approached the building, Lily gasped, "Daddy, look." Black vehicles lined the street. A long motorcade, government plates, men in suits, teachers and parents stood outside whispering in confusion. Daniel stopped walking. He already knew. One of the suited men stepped forward. "Daniel Carter." Daniel sighed, softly. "Yes." The man extended his hand. "Sir, we've been trying to reach you for 3 years." Daniel glanced down at Lily. She looked up curiously. "Daddy, do you know them?" Daniel knelt beside her. "Just old coworkers," he said gently. The man in the suit continued. "After last night's incident, your file was flagged. There's a situation developing overseas, and we need someone with your experience." Daniel looked at the line of black vehicles. Then back at the school. And finally at Lily. She squeezed his hand. "Daddy, are you a hero?" Daniel smiled softly. "No," he said, "I'm just your dad." The man in the suit spoke again. "You wouldn't have to leave immediately. But we hoped you might consider returning to help." Daniel stood silently for a long moment. Then he shook the man's hand. "Right now," he said calmly, "my mission is raising my daughter." The man nodded respectfully. "Understood." The motorcade left. Parents stared. Teachers whispered. But Daniel simply walked Lily into school like nothing unusual had happened. Because to him, the greatest mission of his life wasn't fighting enemies. It was protecting the little girl who once cried out, "Daddy, please stop them." And he always would. If this story touched your heart, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the strongest heroes aren't the ones wearing uniforms, they're the ones quietly pushing a mop down a hallway, doing everything they can for the people they love.